So, fabulous baking boys, how on earth did you get involved in that?
First of all, everyone can hear me? Yeah. People start businesses for lots of different reasons, usually because either they have some particular expertise in what they're about to start their business in, or they have a real passion about it. In my case, it was completely different. So a couple of minutes, I'll tell you the brief version. I came out of university, didn't have any idea what I wanted to do, and I had the chance to go out to New York and work on Wall Street. And this was in the early 80s, and I spent the next 5 years, 82 to 87, trading futures on Wall Street. It was a bit like, has anyone seen the film Wolf of Wall Street? It was a bit like that, but without the drugs. And then, in October of 87, it's great, usually I tell the story at the kids at school, and I'm looking around and thinking, none of these kids were even born in 1987, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. But fortunately, today, a few of you people may have actually, but one or two of you anyways. Anyways, there was a big crash, and I woke up that morning, and I was bust. So, you know, in business, short of actually getting killed, it doesn't get much worse than going to bed rich and waking up broke. So that's what happened to me. And then I came back to the UK. I'd come over here when I was 12, I went to school here, went to university here. And found out, obviously, that I was unemployed. And what do? You sign on the door, which is what I did. And then I found not only was I unemployed, but I was unemployable, because it wasn't just me, they'd been hit by the crash, so all the firms in the city, they were firing people, they were hiring people, so I couldn't get any work doing the only thing I knew how to do. And then I found I couldn't even get a job stacking shelves in Tesco's, because my CV, Oxford graduate, 5 years trading futures, they'd look at me and say, why do you want to stack the shelves in Tesco's? And I'd say, because I need a job. And they said, well, forget about it. So I was unemployed for the best part of a year. And then this is what happened. And this is a true story. And Bob talked about, I was on the radio, I've been on TV and radio and in the press, so it must be true. And also, I must, before I tell the story, just to preface it by saying, I'm not a nutter or some kind of a religious freak. And what happened to me, it never happened to me since, unlike in this or in this. Yeah. Anyways, this is what happened. I'd been unemployed for about a year, and then one night, I had a dream. No, this is a true story. And in this dream, there was an old boy, and he had like long white hair, and long white beard, and a long white gown. I was telling a story once at a university, and sitting next to me, there was a guy who looked exactly like that.
You didn't do the drug.
It was very, anyways. So in the dream, this old boy said to me, Gary, go and make donuts. Anyways, I woke up that morning, and, you know, what do? The thing was, I was unemployed, and luckily, or not, didn't have anything else to do. And as I'd already established, I wasn't going to get a job, it seemed, ever. So it was kind of like, all right, this old boy's just told me to go and make donuts. Why not? You know, I don't know anything about donuts. I don't know anything about starting a business. I don't have a penny to my name other than the £39 a week I get from Social Security. But I got time on my hands, and I've got nothing to lose. But what's the worst that can happen? I'll be unemployed again in 6 months' time. So that's how I ended up starting my business. And 6 months after the dream, on my own, I set up what was then the Delicious Donut Company on a little industrial estate in Whitney. So not because I had any great passion or any certainly no expertise, but some old boy in a dream said, go and do it, and I did. Bit of a long answer to your question, David, sorry.
And one day all businesses will run like that. So you went from making loads of dough to losing all your dough to now making dough.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Come on, I've been so well behaved all day. I've just found you meant someone as mental as me. So you've.
I told you I was doing it.
So I know that amongst many different things, one of the things you're most passionate about is the brand. why?
Well, when I set off on this adventure, and as I'm sure you can already gather, there wasn't any great plan behind what I was doing, or any knowledge or anything. But I started the business, and initially it was just me, and I was just making donuts. And by the way, the old boy gave me a bum steer because the donuts just didn't sell at all. But, you know, in business, when stuff doesn't work, you try something different. So we then got into muffins and flapjacks, and then so the business sort of grew for the next 4 or 5 years. We were just supplying local corner shops and delis and sandwich bars and that kind of stuff. And then I thought, well, the next big thing, if you're a food business, we were just sort of a business at that point, is breaking into the supermarkets, Tesco's and Sainsbury's and all that. And that was where the whole idea of, we were the delicious donut company. By that point, we didn't make donuts anymore, so that really wasn't going to work in supermarkets. We needed a brand and an identity, and something that was going to, first of all, be interesting for the retailers, because they would have to have a reason to stock the products, and also something that would be interesting to the consumers. So that's where the whole idea of them trying to create a brand, something which was a little bit of fun, because at the time, and I'm going to be rude about Mr. Kipling, I know there's, but you know, the cake fixture wasn't very dynamic, wasn't very exciting, wasn't really too interesting. So we thought that was the opportunity, have a bit of fun, be a little bit different, and that's what Bakin Boys brand was all about.
And how did you develop that in terms of your relationship with the supermarkets? Earlier we had Tony talking about sort of making big ticket sales. So you went from a small industrial unit on an estate in Whitney to now approaching the big boys. How did you do that?
Well, this is another nice story. And when I was thinking of trying to crack the supermarkets, and you know, you're talking around, and one of the things I've learned in business is these sort of events like this are so invaluable. It's just so important to talk to other people. You never know what you're going to learn. Although, when I was thinking of breaking into supermarkets, everyone I spoke to in the food business said, don't do it. I remember speaking, somehow I got to meet the guy who was the chief executive of United Biscuits, a guy called Eric Nickley, and we sort of met a few times, played golf a few times, and he said, you're a man, you've got this great little business, you're making loads of money, you're going to the supermarkets, and it's horrible. Which, to a certain extent, he was right, because obviously he knew what he was talking about. But anyways, so we Delicious Donuts became Fab's Bakin Boys, and our plan was we wanted to spend about 18 months kind of seeing how things go. It was October 97 when we became Bakin Boys, so the plan was, as much as there was a plan, by the end of 98 to have a sort of trial with one of the retailers. That went out the window. It was a Friday afternoon in March, so we'd only been going 4 or 5 months. Phone rings, lovely lady on the other end of the phone says, hi, my name is Alison Mars, and I'm the category manager for bakery at Sainsbury's. And first of all, I thought it was one of my friends having a wind up, because you know, in business, you don't get phone calls like that, it just doesn't happen. And once I established she was who she said she was, and she said, you know, there's an opportunity, come and see us. I said, this was Friday afternoon, I said, how about Monday? And she said, yeah, come along Monday afternoon. And at this point, all we did was single-serve impulse products, which for a main supermarket's no good. They have multi-packs, you know, for a family shop. So we worked the whole weekend, cobbled together a mock-up of a multi-pack of our muffins. I was at her desk on Monday afternoon, and 4 weeks later, and to this day, and I look back and I think, I don't know how we did that. 4 weeks later, we were actually selling in Sainsbury's, which was like...
So zip to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Packaging, the whole thing.
The whole thing on the shelves. And,
wow.
You know, nowadays it takes 8 months just to have an idea, so I don't know. We slowed down a little bit in our order rate. And then with the retailers, everyone says it's really hard to, well actually it wasn't. They're like sheep, so once we got in with Sainsbury's, then suddenly Tesco's were on the phone, and Morrison's and Safeways as they then were, and Aston, you know, so it just kind of boom, like that.
Wow.
Not the 1,000% growth that you had, that's, but in production you can't do 1,000%, that's just, you know, 10 or 15% was great. We were doing like 40 or 50%, which was difficult.
So, in terms of selling a business, because most things for business owners, unless it's their true vocation, calling and purpose, is to get out and play golf,
Yeah.
or do whatever it is that you want to do. So you've sold a business. What are the things you've learned? What are the things that business owners need to understand about selling a business, the positives and the challenges?
Well, I'll tell you the best thing that I've learned. And for years and years and years, I was kind of worried about retiring. You know, what am I going to do all day long? And I always thought it's really important to have a clear plan if you're going to set. And the most important thing I've learned is it's brilliant. So if you're thinking of selling your business, don't wait, do it now. It's much more fun being retired than slogging down 24 hours a day, dealing with all the crap. But seriously, let's face it. 90% of running a business is just hard work. And it is also just dealing with problems, because stuff goes wrong, and if you're the boss, inevitably, one way or another, it ends up on your desk. So you just spend all your time just dealing with difficult stuff. When you're retired, on the other hand, you don't have any of that stuff anymore, and you can do what you want. And I spend most of my time just helping small businesses who are now going through all the difficulties of having to deal with all those problems. So that would be my one really big bit of advice. Sell tomorrow and enjoy yourselves.
Yeah, maybe Bob will have a different take.
Sorry, Bob's probably sitting there thinking, oh, why did I ask this one? Sorry, Bob. No, apologies.
I think the question that's on everybody's lips here is, what did you think of the cake?
Actually, it was a bit dry. But I had 3 pieces all the same. So,
in terms of your perspective as a leader, how has your perspective changed over the years?
That's, and on a serious note, that's really interesting, because as I'm sure you all know, when you're in there running your own business day to day, it's the old wood for the trees thing, and you're just embroiled in it. You're caught up in it, and almost like the day after I sold, it was like I see it in a completely different way. I wish I would have been able to see it that way when I'm still in the business, because I just think, as a leader, or if it's your own business or you're an owner manager or whatever, your most important job is to see the big picture, and you just can't do that if you're embroiled in the day-to-day stuff. So, and I'm just saying this, that the interesting thing is how the perspective changes almost immediately when you're not embroiled in the day-to-day stuff. Now, I wish I could tell you how to gain that perspective when you're still in the day-to-day stuff. I'm not sure that I've worked it out, but it's so important to do, because the decisions you make will be completely different if you're making those decisions from up there rather than you're embroiled in firefighting. So, I don't know how to do it other than retire, but it's just so important to do.
A great definition of taking a different perspective, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, in the pre-call interview, you came across as someone who, compared to many people in life who tend to bob along, as leaders our lives tend to be, very much peak trough, peak trough, peak trough, which is a different bobbing along. And you seem to be reasonably balanced in terms of dealing with that ebb and flow, and very much a half-glass full kind of guy. How do you do that?
Well, the glass half full thing is really important. I don't think you can be an entrepreneur or run a business unless you are the most ridiculously optimistic person, because you have to deal with so many problems, and unless you're prepared to think that all those problems can be solved, then it's not going to work. Whereas, essentially, my junior partner was my brother, and he's a glass half empty person. So consequently, he was the guy who did all the numbers and would tell me every day all the things that I couldn't do because we didn't have enough money to do it. But nevertheless, you've got to have that optimism and that passion, and you've got to be driven that way. Having said that, and you're right, I think anyone who's in business, you're dealing with massive amounts of stress all the time and massive problems. And I tended to approach those with a certain amount of equanimity, I like to think. However, I was the worst one for waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning worrying about muffins. And again, that perspective thing. And now I look back on that and I think, is anyone's business dealing with a cure for cancer? Is anyone dealing with something that's going to solve starvation in the third world? No. We're all doing some form or other of muffins. And it's absolutely vitally important to us when we're doing it. But you take a step back and it's only muffins. It's not worth waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, stressing out big time over muffins. Leslie's job, if it all went pear-shaped, the whole of the UK would have ground to a standstill. That's something worth losing sleep over. Whether Tesco's don't get the delivery tomorrow or not, so what, you know, stuff happens.
Just a few nerves there, looking around the room, there are a few sort of,
I bet if we had a show of hands of who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning worried about their business, everyone would be putting their hands up soon.
So, on that bombshell, whoever wakes up in the night with business on their mind? You need to drink more. Or eat cake.
I tried that. It helps.
Now, moving on, in terms of leadership traits, I mean, who has inspired you and how?
That's a very good question, of course. And I was incredibly lucky that when I married my lovely wife, and she planned the honeymoon, and we went to South Africa, and we were staying at this remote lodge in the middle of nowhere, and we seemed to be the only guests, and I was chatting to the guy behind the bar, and I said, "Is anyone else coming?" He said, "Oh yeah, there's another family coming from England." And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And the next day, helicopter pitches up, and Richard Branson and his family get out the helicopter. And the bizarre thing is, I used to live in Kidlington. He literally lived 500 yards down the road from me, and we'd never met. And I joked about it, I said, "You're the perfect wife. You've organised this," and she knew that I always admired Richard Branson. "You've organised this honeymoon especially so that I could meet Richard Branson." Isn't it? And of course, but he is, for any entrepreneur, he's the ultimate inspiration, isn't he? I mean, he's just done everything there is to do. So, and he does all that, you know, crazy stuff with balloons and all the rest of it. So it's got to be him.
It's just muffins.
Yeah,
It's just muffins.
business.
Let's talk about one of your passions, which we share, which is the development of young minds and young people. So you're quite heavily involved in young enterprise.
Yeah. And I would urge, when I was working, I never had time, or I thought I never had time to do actually really interesting stuff like these sort of things, and young enterprise is one. And I don't know if any of you have come across this, but it's something the kids do in lower sixth, so they're 16, 17-year-old. And young enterprise is a charity, and what the kids do is they set up a business. So there's 10 or 12 or 15 of them, and they do everything. So they sell shares in their business to raise money. They have to come up with the idea, the product. They have to get it made or to make it themselves. And then there's competitions, and then they have some old boy comes in once a week as their advisor, just to make sure they don't go completely off the rails. So this year, for the first time, I was advisor to 2 of my local schools, one Charwell in North Oxford and one Gosford in Kidlington, near where I live. And it's fantastic. I mean, I think for the kids, the conventional education system, and we've only got 20 minutes, I could talk all day about this, but it's just appalling what we teach the kids, how to just pass exams, and that's all they get good at. And something like Young Enterprise, where they get a chance to do different things, and particularly business things. And Young Enterprise are always looking for advisors, and they're always looking for real businessmen to come in and help in the schools. So, if it's only an hour a week, so anyways, that's my pitch. But if any of you can spare an hour a week, sign up and get your local schools involved.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I work with about 400 or 500 chief execs in different dioceses across the year, and so many of them will say, "Oh well, when I've got time, then I'll give back, or I'll mentor, or I'll coach." And as you say, start now. Do something now. Make a difference now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, you're leaving a legacy rather than living it. Last question from me, because I think you're going to be inundated from the floor, to be honest. What makes a true entrepreneur? What do you think the attributes are?
It's a difficult question. There's probably loads and loads and loads of things, but I think actually the single most important thing, and again, I go to the schools and I talk to them about setting up business. And of course, my story is nice in a way, because I can say to the kids, you think you need to know loads of stuff to set up your own business. You think you need to know about marketing and sales and tax and accounts and HR and I can say I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know one single thing about business when I started my business. But what I did have was I was prepared and happy to work really, really hard. And I think in answer to your question, the secret of setting up a business, and I think the secret to being an entrepreneur, is you just have to be prepared to work bloody hard and just keep going. And it is just the old 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. It's that 99%, and I'm sure, I'm not teaching psychics, I'm sure you all know just how hard you have to work, especially when you start up on your own. You've got to do everything. There's just not enough hours in the day, so you're working all the time. Well, that's the secret to it.
I'm fast running out of catering puns, so they look like they're chomping at the bit. Let me cake. Bob?
Yeah, who's got questions? Cliff?
When you went from taking back to that, the journey you were talking about, when you went from supplying the local delis and cafes and things with your products to now all of a sudden you're supplying Sainsbury's, that was a kind of sea change, I imagine, in terms of the volume. So how did you fund that?
Well, actually, can I just, a related point to that, which is that when we moved from supplying all the local shops to supplying the Tesco's and Sainsbury's, me, being the idiot that I am, just thought it would be like just the same. And the difficulty was, and I'm not answering your question, but I'm answering a different question, is I didn't have anyone.
The question I should have asked.
I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I just want to echo something that Leslie said. It's just, I spent 25 years in my business, and I spent 24 out of those 25 years wishing that there was someone that I could just ask questions of, someone to talk to who understood not just the sort of psychological traumas I was going through, but actually, what do you do when you go and supply Tesco's? What are the ground rules? What are the things I need to know about? Because it's not the same as supplying Joe's Deli in Oxford. And I never had anyone to be able to ask those questions to. And consequently, you have to learn everything yourself, and you just make a huge number of mistakes. Whereas if you've got someone who says, I actually know Tesco's is not the same as supplying Joe's Deli, you don't do it this way, but you do it that way, it can save an awful lot of pain. So, sorry, what was your question? Because that wasn't the question you asked me.
How did you fund it?
I'm assuming when you started manufacturing for Sainsbury's,
Yes.
and obviously knowing the kind of the good practice that they would require,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you went from essentially making stuff in the kitchen to a full production
Well,
line.
we had been growing over the years,
Okay.
and to be honest, the first 4, 5, 6 years, we were making so much money that we were sitting on a big cash pile, which is what we used
Okay.
to
It was all organic growth.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
external
yeah.
investment.
No.
Okay.
Klaus?
Yeah,
Yeah, Klaus first. And
Klaus
then
first.
you were talking about brands and the importance of brands for you to sell into Sainsbury. What exactly is it in a brand that makes your product, your company successful, and does that translate from muffins to other businesses as well, technology, for example?
Gosh, that's a really good question, and I'm a businessman, not a brand expert, so it's a really hard question to answer. I mean, but I think at the end of it, it's people have to relate. It has to mean something, and it has to resonate in some way, because inevitably there's always a choice, and in retail there's always the choice of the end label. So our muffins would be £1.50 and the Tesco's one would be £1. So why is someone going to pay the extra 50p? It has to be because there's some connection, and you're fulfilling some sort of a need in your consumer. I think the key to it, and we spend a lot of time, is talking to your consumers and understand what it is they're looking for, what it is they want, and then trying to provide that. But it's also really, really easy to get it wrong. And it's also really, really easy to spend a lot of money in marketing, which is completely wasted as well. So the short answer is it's a really, really difficult question to answer, and it's really hard to do.
Thanks. Steve?
Gary, how did you exit, and how did the exit come about?
Actually, my story sadly doesn't have a happy ending, because it's a very long story, but we had a very, very difficult exit and very painful. And so again, I don't have time to tell you all about it. But it was very difficult, and it wasn't the big payout that I was hoping for, but it was what it was, and that's what we ended up with. So it's, you know, the moral there is, even after 25 years of business, things can always be very difficult, and always prepare for those sorts of difficulties that can come out of left field.
And reinforces your earlier point about sell now.
Yeah, exactly. So now.
Mark,
Yeah, I was really keen and interested on brilliant, fabulous in your brand name.
Yeah.
Does that avoid you from any advertising standards requirements?
Hopefully, I don't know. The name obviously had a link with the film, which some of you also might remember. And we did ask Michelle Pfeiffer if she would be our spokesperson, but funny enough, she wasn't interested.
Any other questions from the floor?
Liz?
I thought your talk was lovely and really refreshing. I think it is incredibly difficult being an entrepreneur and incredibly hard work. One of our clients is a company that finds buyers for SME companies. And I was sitting with them the other day and they were saying that there's about 200 companies that sell every year in the UK out of, what are there, 3 million companies or something? Why do you think people don't sell their businesses at the right time? What is it that stops us from seizing the day, if you like, and letting go at the right time?
That is a really interesting question, and I suppose there's lots of reasons. In my case, I suppose it was twofold. It was like, if I did sell, what was I going to do? Because I'm still relatively young. But as I've told you before, now I found that's not an issue at all. And I suppose the other thing is, we were on this constant growth curve. So you're always thinking, well, why sell now? Because next year will be worth X more, and the year after that will be worth X more than that. So it was always about, let's keep going, because it made sense to keep going, because... But then you've got to think to yourself, you know, how much money do I really need? You know, if you can sell for 1 million, is that enough? If you can sell for 5 million, if you can sell for 10, 20, 200, everyone's got to sort of sit down perhaps and decide how much do you really need, and maybe it's not as much as you think.
Chris?
It's a hard one. I mean, it is hard.
Yeah, I get the sense you were passionate about donuts and you're a bit different about muffins. What was actually driving you?
You're right. I didn't start the business because I was a mad foodie or a baker or anything like that. What drove me is the business. I just loved going into work, despite the aggravation. And you know, every day is different, and every day we could go off and do whatever we wanted. And I suppose, like most entrepreneurs, I'm an ideas guy, so I could just come in and, you know, today we're going to do something completely different, and then tomorrow again, something completely different. My team eventually got used to, and they don't look at me and, you know, not take any notice. Quite right. But that's, you know, that's why we all go to work, I suppose, is because it's that challenge.
Great. Andy?
Well, can I ask Maurice a question on the tweet board,
Oh, yes.
which is that one?
Oh, yes.
Top one.
How much of your muffin success do you put down to luck? Sainsbury's calling you, for example.
Also a good question, and this might sound immodest, but I don't put any of it down to luck. Because what I really believe is you make your own luck. And Sainsbury's called us because we were out there doing what we were doing. And, you know, if you just sit at home watching TV hoping you're going to get lucky, it doesn't happen, does it? But if you're out there and just doing stuff, then stuff happens. Sorry, the interesting thing is as well, sometimes stuff happens which you only realise why it was such a brilliant thing in hindsight. So for example, in 1987, when I went to bed rich and I woke up broke, and at the time I thought, that's a pretty bad thing that's just happened to me. And yet now I look back and I think, absolutely without hesitation, best thing that possibly could have happened to me. So, you know, that's not luck, that's just like stuff.
And just to reinforce that with something you commented on, Gary, that was Yeah, you got the phone call from Sainsbury's. I remember you saying that you worked all weekend to put together the things that met
Exactly.
Sainsbury's needs. It
Exactly.
wasn't like you said, oh yeah, I'll meet you on Monday.
Yeah.
Or no, actually I'll meet you in 3 weeks' time. It was, I'll meet you Monday.
Yeah, and let's do it and get it right.
Absolutely. Mark, you were next.
We've heard from a few of the people today, and Tony spoke about being sales biased. Leslie spoke about coming from an operations background. You said you had no experience in sales, marketing, What, in the end, what skill did you most identify with, and what areas of, I suppose, commercial business do you think is the most important for a leader or a manager to understand best?
I think the answer to that is simple, and I always saw myself as a salesman, because there is no business, if you don't sell stuff, you don't have a business. And so we were always a very sales-driven business, and that to me was the most important thing. Having said that, it's really hard to sell if you haven't got a decent product to sell and decent support behind it. But it's interesting. I spend most of my time just helping very small businesses, and it's almost always the single biggest issue is they're just not getting out there and selling. And it solves almost all the problems if you're driving the revenue, because that feeds the bottom line as well, and everything works so much better if you're selling more. So, sales.
Klaus and then Steve.
Did you ever ask Sainsbury why they called you?
I didn't actually ask, but I suspect now, knowing what I know about the retailers, is that the supplier let them down, and so they suddenly had space on the shelves, because otherwise they don't call you. They only call you when they need something and they clearly have a problem, which we could easily fix.
Okay. Steve.
Did the chap with the long white robe and beard ever come back?
No, sadly not, no.
Was he a non-exec director?
Never heard from him again.
I speak in colleges and schools quite a lot, and when I speak to teachers, they quite often say that we have a huge issue with apathy, and you've talked a lot about hard work. How do we, do you notice apathy amongst the young people that you work with? And as a parent and a business leader, what do we do to change that?
Yeah, blimey, that's a really big question, isn't it? And it's absolutely...
Oh, and one more thing.
Oh.
What role has Simon Cowell played in the apathy issue?
Okay, but I'll deal with the first one first, because I couldn't comment on the second one. I used to find it so frustrating as an employer, and kids would send in their email or their CVs, and they were properly written. There was spelling mistakes. You think you've got a spells checker on your computer, and you're still sending me a CV with spelling mistakes. Why am I going to interview you or give you a job? And I think that the school system is failing these kids, because it's not teaching them simple stuff like how to write a CV, what to do in an interview, and I remember we employed one girl, university graduate, and marketing assistant. At the end of the week, she said, I'm sorry, I can't work for you any longer, because I have to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning and work till 5, and it's just too much hard work for me. Well, who had taught this woman? It makes you despair. So I just aware of the problems. The solution is God, I wish that there was one, because it just needs sorting out.
I think I saw a question this way somewhere. I can't just call it.
Whilst we're thinking of a question, Gary's highlighted something that a few people have highlighted today, which is the power of having somebody just to ask questions of. And it's kind of dawned on Bob just now that, can anyone think of an organisation where you might be able to think about it? But basically, you're in a room. Can you imagine the combined expertise in this room? Could you imagine that? I mean, the Lunar Society was famously attributed to the development of the Industrial Revolution, a group of between 6 and 14 men who just used to get rolling drunk for a weekend, share best practice, support each other, set massive goals and hold each other to account.
Sounds like MD to MD.
It does a bit like a retreat for MD to MD, doesn't it? But if they can do that, can you imagine the combined expertise in this room? Ask for help. Ask for help, guys.
And if I can just add as well, whatever you do, I was sitting with some chaps who are in the construction business, and I'm sure you all do different things, but the issues are always the same. You know, it's either about your customers or your staff or your product or your suppliers. It's not that many. It doesn't matter what the business is. The problems are always the same. So, you know, all you guys are able to help each other with those problems, or you get someone in to help if they've done it, they've seen it. It's not that difficult sometimes. to
Just,
sort it out.
just being a bit of a geek, a quick calculation in my head suggests it's about 2,000 years of experience in this room.
Yeah, geek. And, but yeah, good observation. Good observation. I think it only remains to say, Gary Frank, thank you very much.